Excellent. The recording has started. So, welcome to 191 Waukegan Road in Northfield, Illinois. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of a shot of where we are. You're seeing me right here, right now. I'm going to let you go ahead and take a look at the fact that this particular property sits on a fairly major frontage road called Waukegan, which is on the northwest side of the northern suburbs of Chicago. We're what, 2 miles away from 94 or so? Not even?
Yeah, maybe.
Interstate 94 is also a major interstate that comes through here. As I had discussed with you previously, what the Dutch need remember is that Americans like to drive far more than you all do. So here we have our surface parking. And as I rotate over to this way, here we have the most important person you'll meet today. This is the boss, Mr. Matthew Bauman, carries the title of, what are you, managing director? What is your title? Founder, owner, Darth Vader, whatever you want to call him. He would be the person who will going to guide us on this tour today. In the characters that we are playing for the purposes of your class, you have myself and Maurice playing the roles of your investors. You had Tim Rose playing the role of an investment advisor. Now you have Matt, who would be the person specifically with boots on the ground, doing due diligence, finding properties, and then pitching to someone like Maurice and I why we should consider investing in his commercial property endeavor. So, Matt, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about where we are at 191 Northfield here?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to do this. Pleasure to make your virtual acquaintance. Welcome to our building, 191 Waukegan. This building was purchased by us in September of 2019.
September 2019.
Right before the pandemic. And we purchased the building. It's a 61,000 square feet rentable square foot building.
61,000 rentable square feet. Got it.
3 stories.
3 stories.
So approximately 20,000 per floor, plus and minus some common areas, etc. So the property sits on a very large amount of land, which provides very, very good, adequate parking for what we need here, which are a lot of service providers, doctor groups. We actually have, in our parking lot, you have some visitor parking over here, which we have both front and back, in large part because we want our tenants to have the ability to have their clients come and go in a very quick manner without having to park too far from the front door. Some of these clients, especially our medical tenants, have clients that are either or otherwise need the ability to get from point A to point B in a very, very short amount of distance. And so that provides them that luxury.
Remind me too, is it local ordinance or general rule of thumb that requires you to have a certain amount of parking per square foot?
Yeah, generally speaking, in office space, you need around 4 parking spaces per 1,000 rentable square feet.
4 parking spaces per 1,000 rentable square feet. Got it.
And there are, as you get larger and larger medical tenants, those metrics change a little bit. So once you get over a certain amount of square footage, in Northfield it's 5,000, you actually have to provide them 6 per 1,000 parking. Now we have so much parking here that that's never going to be an issue, fortunately for us. So we're able to do deals of really any size. And the largest tenant in this building, frankly, is only 5,000 square feet, which is a medical tenant.
The largest tenant is 5,000 feet, a medical tenant, so representing less than 10% occupancy of the whole building. Right. Is that important to you?
That's a hugely important metric to us, as we look at office buildings much like we look at apartment buildings. So if you have an apartment building that has 50 units in it, and you lose 5 units, you don't get hurt that badly. Well, same thing in office. If I take an office building with 60,000 square feet and I cut it up into suites that are smaller than 10% of my rentable area in various sizes, and I lose a few tenants now and again, it's not going to hurt us tremendously bad. So this is exactly the model building that we like to purchase, and exactly the types of building that are in our portfolio, frankly. generally speaking, we do have a couple exceptions to that rule, but this is generally almost the ideal situation for us. This is what we like. It's not for everybody. The good news when you have smaller tenants is that you tend to get direct deals, meaning the businesses come to us directly and without a broker. And what that means is there's less costs to that deal. So if that makes sense.
So for example, the lease that I just signed, we had a broker involved who had commissions that needed to be paid by the property manager.
Correct.
You save that if it's a direct deal.
Save that if it's a direct deal, and that's a pretty big deal because those commissions can run you either anywhere from $1 to $1.50 per square foot per year of term.
Per year of term. Interesting. Okay.
If you think about a 5,000, that's that 5,000 square foot medical deal. Unfortunately, did have a broker, and that broker was paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $35,000.
$35,000 on a 5,000 square foot.
Did absolutely nothing besides walk the guy through our building, and then I told her to just step aside and let us work out a deal.
So they signed a 6-year lease on 5,000 square feet.
It was 5,321 with a $1.25 square.
$1.25 each. So this person made $35,000 to bring you a tenant. Got it. And you paid that $35,000.
Paid that $35,000. We also gave the tenant a $30 tenant improvement allowance, which was another $65,000 or so. So the grand total of that deal is almost $200,000. Now that tenant signed a long-term deal. They're going to be paying us upwards of $11,000 a month in rent.
Per square foot, that would be approximately
$24 a square foot.
$24. How does that compare to the rest of the rents in the building?
Average rent in this building is pushing $25. The last few deals that we've done are in the $25 to $26. 25 to 26 is
the sweet spot here. So on that front end, then you gave him $30 per square foot tenant improvements. The doctor spent a grand total of $350,000 on his build out, of which he spent $200 of his own money. Gotcha. So you subsidized his build out. Do you have, for example, then approval rights over the plans and the design, so he's not doing things that are ridiculous?
Correct. He actually hired very, very high-end union contractors and a GC. And so, the plans that when we oversee these, it's basically you take a look at them and you rubber stamp them. I mean, it's you're getting the best of the best at that point.
You're making sure, though, he's not installing a swimming pool inside.
Correct. Yeah. You have to do it for code. So the bottom line is that the GC can't do anything that isn't to code, that isn't drawn on those plans, which are already approved by the village. And so the whole circle effect is in effect, right? So the village needs to approve the plans, the tenant needs to like the plans, I have to rubber stamp the plans to say, yeah, that's fine. Very, very few times that we've ever objected to anything.
Yeah.
There's really very little to object to in those circumstances. But again, if it's not to code, the village is going to pick up on it.
So we're in the village of Northfield here.
Correct.
How significantly different is that process if you were to purchase a building in downtown Chicago?
Well, there's a lot more red tape in Chicago than there is in a town like Northfield. Northfield's a very small community, relatively speaking, and therefore you're dealing with the same folks on every deal. Whereas in Chicago, depending on where we might have a building, I could have anywhere between 5 and 10 different folks that I got to deal with, and those are the type of employees that really don't care about anything that has to do with the business and relationship between the government and the business itself. And so that's a very hard dynamic to overcome. So working in Chicago is a lot different than working in a smaller town like Northfield, where you can gain the confidence of these people. Day one, we called them and we introduced ourselves and said, here's who we are, here's the building. Is there anything I need to know about codes with regards to my tenants? We already went through our due diligence. We knew that there weren't any outstanding code-related items, but we established that relationship very early so that when it comes time to go to them and say, hey, I need some plans approved, we're going to get pretty good attention on that.
Mm-hmm. Whereas Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago still hasn't set up that follow-up meeting with you yet?
There won't be any meeting with Mayor Lightfoot. So just a much different dynamic in a town or in a city with 3 million people.
Well, before we start up inside, then let's kind of help them size this up too in terms of where this sits in your portfolio. So this is 61,000 square feet.
Correct.
Do you have some estimate, your entire portfolio, how much square footage do you own?
I would say close to 500,000 square feet total. So it's it's 10% of.
So this is 10% of the portfolio. And is that portfolio entirely commercial? Is there some industrial, some residential in there?
Yeah, I mean, and by commercial, we look at real estate in two ways. It's either residential or commercial. And for residential, what residential means to me are homes, apartments, condos.
Okay.
Whereas in our business, commercial to me means office buildings, shopping centers, industrial buildings,
warehouses,
multifamily buildings. So
multifamily falls into commercial.
So like an 8-unit, the building that our office sits has 2 commercial units on the first floor and 8 residential units above it. That's a commercial building.
Okay.
So it's considered multifamily, but multifamily is considered commercial because it's a commercial. It's different than like you're a residential agent who really only handles homes, apartments, condos. Very rarely gets into the actual business of the real estate, which is someone looking to purchase multiple units across the portfolio. That's a little bit of a different story. That's what kind of makes that differentiator.
So at the 500,000 square feet, then, ballpark, how many tenants do you have?
I would say we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 150.
150 separate tenants with individual leases, different size spaces from how many square feet on the low end?
500 square feet on the low end up to, I think our largest tenant is 30,000 square feet.
30,000.
That's an industrial user, which is not unusual at all for industrial.
Yeah.
Industrial users tend to have much more space.
All right, well, gang, I'm going to go on mute and you can walk into the inside. We're going to do the inside tour. I'm imagining it will be easier to hear us too without the traffic noise. So I'll be back with you in a moment. I'm going to turn this on me for a second, everybody. Okay, so one of the things that we've talked about when we looked at the financial analysis was thinking about all the different operating expenses, and we broke them roughly into those multiple categories, including common area maintenance. When we think about common area maintenance, we also think about things like insurance. We think about things like basic repairs and housekeeping, landscaping, like you saw outside. And then the other big category we talked about was real estate tax. So let's go ahead and take a look here in the common area of this building. And Matt is actually doing something very interesting right now. Matt is walking around in his own building, taking down signs suggesting that 6 feet worth of social distancing and masks is no longer required here in the city of Northfield. Matt, what type of impact did COVID have on your business over the last year?
I would say it was nerve-wracking for all of us because we just didn't. The unknowns were pretty severe, and so generally speaking, our tenants were able to survive in large part because of government aid. There was funding that was given to many of these businesses that were basically out of business for those 3 months that we were actually shut down, and as they ramped back up in June of last year. They were able to kind of survive survive the pandemic from it. And we were very fortunate in that most of our tenants were, paid us rent on time every time and utilized those funds in order to, which was exactly what the funds were supposed to be utilized for, which was not only to keep your employees but also to pay your occupancy costs because of all of the things that you think about. The help that was given. Help was given to businesses, but help was not given to commercial landlords.
Right.
So I was given no abatement of taxes. I was given no break on my insurance. I still have to maintain my building, et cetera, et cetera. And so was very helpful that our tenants understood that, and we kept in constant communication with them as new regulations were coming out, as these programs were coming out. We were teeing them up effectively for our tenants by writing out exactly what they needed to do to apply for those loans.
Really?
So we were on the very, very front end of that, and got in front of it very, very quickly, and really partnered with all of our tenants to make sure that none of them had an excuse not to be able to afford.
At the same time that you're in front, basically helping 150 different tenants to make sure they can continue to pay you, are you communicating on the back end with banks and investors to reset expectations in the event that struggles are greater?
Yeah, we had, most of our banks reached out to us or vice versa, and offered various programs that they had. They a lot of times, the one bank that helped us the most was on a shopping center where all of our tenants were basically out of business. We were deferring rent, not abating it. We were deferring it.
Deferring it,
right?
Yep.
Abating means we're just going to forgive it, whereas deferring it means we pushed it off until everybody could get back up and running again. And again, those PPP funds, which were those funds that the government provided to most of these tenants, were to be utilized to pay us back. And that's kind of what we did. We worked with all of them through that process in order to make it seamless. Our bank at that retail shopping center came to us very early on and said, listen, we're going to give you what's called a forbearance. And so a forbearance basically says we're going to forgive the next 3 months of principal and interest payments and push it to the end of the lease,
right,
or to the end of the term of the note.
Yeah.
And so we were basically forgiven those 3 months, which allowed us to get through those 3 months with the cash flow. It was just a cash flow mechanism more than anything, and it really helped us out because we didn't know at the time how much we would need, or what those,
or how long you would need it for,
we were going to need it, or what these programs were going to effectively become for our tenants. And so once we had that knowledge, we were able to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we've been made whole. All the lenders were made whole.
Yeah.
And it was only really one lender, frankly, because the rest of my lenders, we just didn't need it, which was good. Fortunate.
So one of the terms I've taught the Dutch is CAM, or common area maintenance. And for me, the simplest visual image is always the lobby of a building as being, as your note said, common area. Now, common area is far more inclusive than just this particular space. But what attracted you to this building at first when you came into it?
Well, certainly not the lobby look. This was something that we looked at and we said, this is very dated. It's wallpaper. It's why not very attractive, and certainly not very modern in terms of the modern office building here in the States. So this was we looked at this as a instant upgrade, something that we could do to really enhance the look and the feel of this building. So we actually, when we set this model up for this building, we set it up where we said, okay, we're going to lease up the building. We bought this building with about 82% occupancy.
82% at purchase. Got it.
Purchase in 19, and then of course the pandemic hits and you don't know what's going to happen. But we had laid out kind of a plan, a capital plan, where we were going to start doing upgrades like this pretty quickly on, so that we could attract new tenants. Well, lo and behold, new tenants came flooding into this building for whatever reason. I think it's a little bit has to do with the market and the way we were able to creatively structure deals here. And we were able to fill up the building much quicker than we thought. And so all the capital that we had set aside for doing improvements went basically to do new deals with these tenants. And so at this point, we're at a point now where we've gone back to our lender and we've extended our loan in order to actually pay us back some of the capital that we've put into the tenant spaces, and now utilize some of that money, repurpose some of that
to reallocate it towards
to the lobby here. We're going to be doing a monument sign out in front of the building, which will allow for 6 tenant panels.
Okay.
And we've already committed one to our largest tenant, which is the pulmonologist. Our dentist is going to get a spot, and then we need to figure out who gets the rest.
So part of their exercise is they will need to pitch to us potential investors a property that they would like us to invest in, and they need to build a financial model that accompanies it. Upon due diligence, you said 82% occupied. When you projected forward, then what number did you use
As
an occupancy, as a stable occupancy?
Occupancy, we projected 92.
So 92. So you anticipated that a year out, 2 years out?
We said over a year period, because you're going to have tenants that leave and then you have to replace as well during that amount of time.
Got it.
And so you figure, and as you look at that rent roll, you have to look at those expirations, and you have to predict. You have to have a model that predicts whether they're going to stay or not.
Yeah.
Well, generally speaking, 75% of your tenants will stay. So
75 is your core. Okay.
So once you do that and you factor that into the model, it spits out basically where you need to be capitalized in order to make sure that you can pay for those deals and for new deals as well.
Okay. Let me ask you this. How often do you model at 100% occupancy?
Very infrequent. Like never. I mean, it's just it's not a rational.
It's not realistic.
Nor is it bankable. So
the bank won't accept it.
Yeah. So think about when you go to your lender and you say, "Here's what my model looks like." They're going to be like 100% the suburban office market vacancy rate is 25%.
Is 25% right now? There's 25% availability.
For our portfolio,
it's full. For your portfolio, it's at 4%. So you model at 92, but you exceed your own expectations there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
all right.
We're here. We're at
98 here.
And we were not expecting 98 in this short amount of time during the pandemic, but here we are.
So listen to that closely, Dutch, as you make that presentation to a finance-minded person. If you're coming to us suggesting that you're going to be at 100% occupancy within your first year and then carry that forward, we're probably going to ask where you can substantiate that. So what do you think about taking a poke into one of your finished spaces? Let me go ahead and put these guys on mute. We'll be right there. While we're at it, here's an example of their tenant board, digital, and most importantly, right here, here's the person that we're dealing with right now, who's going to take us and show us first an occupied space, and then we'll take a look at one that is in conversion. All right, Matt, it smells in here. What's going on?
All right, so we had a complaint from next door because this smell is pretty pungent.
The adhesive glues.
This is heat. So this is a space that was initially around 2,500 square feet.
2,500 square feet?
To a space that was around 2,000 square feet.
So you had 1,000 next to each other.
Correct. The tenant that was next to us was too small for their space. So we approached them and we said, we have space upstairs that we could move you to, and we'll build it out for you if we can move you so that we could get this new tenant, this is a new tenant that's going in 3,600 square feet.
3,600 square foot
Yep.
new tenant
New
coming
tenant
in.
coming
So you
in.
took the 2,500 and the 2,000, you're squishing them
Yes.
together
Squish them together.
and making it into 36.
Making 3,600, and I'll have some extra space left over, which I'll show you.
Some extra space, yeah, an extra 900 somewhere, okay?
Yeah, and so what'll happen, what became of this is we completely gutted this and rebuilt it. So, including adding a bathroom. So, new flooring and ceiling in the bathroom.
And the tenant that's coming in here, give me some sense of their timeline. When did you first come into contact with them? When are they moving in?
Basically January, February. And we took them through. It was a plan that happened very quickly. It was a broker that I knew who came to us specifically because he knew us.
Okay.
And he knew us as good managers and good, basically good, easier deals to be done here. So we brought them through this space. They loved it. It's a counseling center.
A counseling center, like psychological counseling.
Exactly. So basically a month from start to finish on negotiations and architectural drawings. We had another month of approvals, on it, and then construction started, I want to say, beginning of April, and we are basically at a sprint right now to finish this space. This space will be moved into by this weekend.
By this weekend. Okay. Because June, so basically June 1st start date. Okay.
All new lighting, all new ceilings, all new flooring.
And lease terms?
This was a 7-year deal.
7-year deal. Okay.
Bumps and then maybe a couple months of free rent.
So 7 years, $24.50 rent increases built in per year. What type of construction allotments did you give to them? Who's funding this?
I did. We funded this whole thing, and we turnkey.
Okay.
Which is different than giving an allowance. So we basically said we'll do the work, manage the work, and we'll try to bring it in at a certain number. We're going to end up being in the $30.
Okay.
You can see these are very, very nice spaces. So they turn out just absolutely gorgeous when they're done.
So for example, then this would be a standalone individual unit that a psychologist would be set up with to visit clients in a wonderfully bright space that has now all new flooring, all new walls, all new ceiling, all new lighting at a time when it seems to me from our previous conversations, psychological counseling services are booming. Yeah. Okay. And this separate is about 900-ish of rentable space?
The separate space is
actually,
I think I messed up. I think the other tenant was 2,800 square feet.
28.
1,700 left.
1,700 left. Okay, so you do have sufficient footprint for another rentable space.
All right, so this is the space. This is our project manager, Pryor.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello to the Swedes.
No, these are Dutch today. Sorry, the Swedes and the Dutch, they get along okay.
I hope so. I apologize.
Yeah. This is Jeff from your office, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never actually met you, Occupancy. My pleasure.
Why does that name sound so familiar?
Probably did prison time together.
Oh boy, I hope not.
Jeff is actually new to Matt's team 2 years ago. When did you join Matt?
August of last year.
August of last year. And at 500,000 square feet and 150 tenants, this is the man that does what for you?
He basically manages every single construction project and any sort of facility work that needs to be taking place. So if a tenant calls up and says, I got a major issue, this guy needs to be the one who hears about it first.
So, for example, when you just suggested about the lease that started Jan 1 and you negotiated, now we're doing this space, he's on the hook to deliver a finished property by this weekend. That's why Jeff is here right now, I'm imagining.
And
It's a photo finish next door, but we're going to make it happen. Yep.
Excellent. So what are the things that keep you up at night with your job then, working with Matt?
We're not careful getting into that.
Yeah, we can keep certain personal things to ourselves, but
no. It's there are no things. We've got a good team effort. We've got a good team crew out there.
Mm-hmm.
Good team in the office. So that's what makes it happen.
What's the primary driver that makes you successful as a project manager? Is it contractor relationships? Is it communication? What helps make your job easier?
So all of the above.
Okay.
We just had one of the contractors come in for sprinkler work. Been doing work with them for 15 years. Relations with all the inspectors.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out well, and they appreciate that we try to give them the space. We're all working together. So
yeah.
Quick question. You saw the fire department here, right? The gentleman.
Yeah, I just talked to him.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just making sure. When I see him come through the buildings, I always get. I pee a little, so because you never know when it's going to come up. But I figured he was coming here to.
It was a hydrostatic test. He had to come back in and make sure that it was still up to pressure. So,
well, I think we will have the benefit of bringing the Dutch on site again in the fall when traveling is available. This is a short-term mechanism during COVID to allow us to get a sense of what you all deal with. So we're broadcasting live right now, but hopefully, Jeff, in the fall when we do come back, maybe we'll have a chance to have you on site too, and you can talk with them in addition to Matt, because Matt's a font of knowledge, but we always welcome more to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're ready.
So what do we got going on over here, gentlemen?
All right, so this we're trying to get a chiropractor, who does a lot of office work with their clientele, and so they need what's going to end up happening here if this deal comes together is that we need to change certain things in here. So this is a very narrow corridor,
Okay.
right, with not a whole lot of lobby, and so this kitchen will be flipped. So we're going to move the plumbing to this side of the wall.
Oh, wow.
This will become a small reception.
Gotcha. So if I enter from here,
this wall will be gone.
This wall comes out, so now I have a grander open lobby space. Yep.
And there'll be basically a small kitchenette here.
Okay.
And this room will stay, and then we're blowing out the rest of this. So all those walls will come down. And this is going to be kind of like a large area. If you've ever been into a chiropractic office, sometimes there's a private rooms for doing certain work on the body. And then oftentimes there's much more physical therapy going on in an open space. This is what this will look like. Wonderful. So it's actually relatively smaller build out considering some of the ones we've been doing in here. But it'll be a really good deal for us because this one was going to be modeled as permanently vacant, just because it doesn't lay out well.
Mm-hmm.
We just said let's just model this thing as permanently vacant. So at this point we're going to be modeling nothing in this building as permanently vacant, just because we just keep the activity has been so small.
I think what I like about our particular time here together is we are reinforcing the criticality of ensuring that you get the tenants and leases you want by providing for them the custom space that they desire.
Yeah, and you need to have everybody working in line with that. And so the key is to make sure that you understand what those costs are going to be in order to. So I can't just guess at what the costs are going to be to do this type of work. I need him and my partner John, who are very good on the construction side of things, to price these things out for me prior to me even giving them a proposal, so that I understand what dollars and cents I have to work with. Most of the time in smaller spaces like this, we're going to build this out what's called turnkey. I'm not going to give them an allowance like I did that doctor who I knew was going to blow through that allowance and have to spend a couple $100,000 on his own. I'm going to say, I'll take care of everything for you, so that day one, turnkey means I'm going to turn my key, walk in my space, and it's going to be ready.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very careful with that, though, because then, certain things, we always use words like building standard fixtures, building standard carpet, building standard. So that you understand that if you want to upgrade to marble, that there's going to be a considerable cost advancement from you.
So if we were to make an analogy, for example, to residential leases, we as tenants walk in and we don't negotiate a lease. We just say, we're just going to move in and it's as is. And we feel as individuals, we have no particular power because we're signing 12 months,
Right.
but you're like you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, to stay. What can I do to get the space? Negotiating on how it will look together.
And I will tell you that in order to build out space for tenants, it's a 5-year minimum deal.
Mm-hmm.
We're pushing into 6 and 7 because construction costs have absolutely skyrocketed in the last 6 months. And so we have to adjust accordingly. I mean, and that's just, it all comes down to financial modeling, which is that's just so critical to this whole business, is making sure that you understand where those costs line up with how quickly you're going to make that money back over the term, and making sure you have security against it, right? Because I don't know these people from Adam, right? So I need to understand when they're coming in. I need to see their financials. I need to know I have a guarantee behind it. I need to know I have a substantial security deposit in some cases in order to make the deal work.
Absolutely. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys again, and Matt and I will go to a new space, and we'll find you in just a few moments.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so there are some sensitivities right now to the fact are still in a mask and COVID environment. Many of the tenants are still being cautious. So what I'm give you some sense of what Matt was talking about in terms of a finished space. And Matt, this looks like a financial services client.
That's correct.
Does that sound right?
Well, I'm sorry, that's I take that back. That is a divorce attorneys.
Gotcha. So professional services legal team. So an example of what a finished space looked like, what the walk-in lobby with the offices completed off here. And now we will go and sit down someplace where we can chat with you all. Okay, again, real briefly, I have asked so that we can read the policy. There's one particular client waiting right here, so we're just going to make this brief, but I'm going to show you a really impressive little spot.
I have some Dutch students that would like to see your lobby, if that's okay.
Well, good day. Hello. Oh, please don't hide. We are just visiting and showing how delightful of a space and business you run to 40 students who are in the Netherlands right now, wishing they could be joining us here in the United States. But because of COVID, they are not able to visit this delightful finished space that, Matt, these folks have been with you for how long?
They've been in here for years now. Who do you guys know?
Since 2018.
You guys, this was done right before we bought it.
right. Well, thank you so kindly. We appreciate you allowing us to respectfully view your space. I hope you have a lovely day. Again, we're trying to be very respectful in these ending COVID times. So Matt is going to go and ask if we can get access to one other space. In the meantime, I'm just taking you down this hallway and showing you then. I can turn my camera. Some smaller finished spaces like a leukemia research foundation office. So again, notice that in a lot of this commercial space, especially on the north side of the city of Chicago, you're dealing with tenants who are doing things too, which you can see is very different than some of the other spaces in terms of having a much wider entrance with a conference table fold separator to give them more of an open concept space. So what my hope is now is Matt will get us entry in there. And if not, we're going to go sit down and just do a little bit of interviewing. So if you'd like to, I would encourage you to start typing a couple of questions into the chat box because I'm certain Matt would be happy to answer your questions. So feel free to do that and we'll be back with you again in a moment. All right, the tenant has been kind enough to allow us to see something, and as I suggested, a very different design in this building.
Yeah, completely. So there used to be a wall that went all the way down to right here.
Okay.
And that was reception. And there was like an actual half wall here, and there was a room behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically gutted all of this, opened this up so they could have kind of a nice conference space.
Mm-hmm.
They do not see clients in here at all.
Okay.
So there's no reason for a reception of any kind. You see this is put up right here,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you look down the hallway, you can see that this
You have
is
signage from
it
the
also
hallway.
has another purpose, which is to kind of cover what they're doing here,
Sure.
which is very sensitive. And
Yep.
so we'll have you take a quick peek, and you can take a quick peek from kind of like right here, just so you can kind of see this is what would be considered a lab space, and then that's about as much as we'd be.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right.
So they're doing very high-end, high-tech, neuroscientific research, and they're putting together products for basically the brain.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very
Okay, my apologies there. I put you in my back pocket and hung up on you. What I would like to do right now is suggest we take a 10-minute break or so, and then we'll allow Matt and I to sit down. We'll pop open my computer so that we can get a bigger, fuller screen, and we'll go from a tour to more of a Q&A. So, okay, you want me to come up there? All right, third floor. I'll be up there in just a minute, so hang on, everybody. Give me about 5 minutes to settle in, and we'll see you for the last portion of our tour. Okay, with 1% occupancy, which seems to me to be a reasonably decent problem to have, we have found the only space that is currently unoccupied
And not being negotiated for rent.
and sitting by itself. So I'll just give you some sense here on my laptop. So as we come out of the major hallway, we enter into the space, what we find is a very modest, smaller space with basically one interior office, one larger space that looked to be more of a reception type space and a waiting room.
This was a real estate office for a very, very long time, and then the two principals sat on either side of this little half wall. So.
I'll come and join Mr. Bauman on this side and open up the chat box here. I have to Make sure that the computer tilts. He's slightly taller than I am. All right, show conversation.
Holy smokes.
Great. So here we go. So some of these we may have answered already. So Caetano asked a great question yesterday about what is a triple net lease exactly, Matt? Could you give us a brief overview of what your definition is?
Rent as an aggregate is comprised of different components. There's base rent, which is the rent that you are going to charge someone based on their square footage. Then there's the portion of that rent, which could be considered taxes, CAM, which we discussed, which was common area maintenance. And some people would like to say insurance. That's that third part of that triple net. So taxes, CAM, insurance. We basically say taxes and CAM and just throw the insurance in the CAM. So and on a triple net basis, if I was to quote rent on a triple net basis, it would be a base rent number of, let's say, $10 a square foot. And then the logical question is, well, what are your triple nets? In other words, what are your pass-throughs? So those are all called pass-throughs. And those numbers are basically at cost. So it's the tax number based on your square footage. So if you're 10% of the building, you're going to pay 10% of the taxes on the building. And if you're similarly for CAM. So that's how that works. Our leases here are considered modified gross. So when I say $25 a square foot modified gross, that's inclusive of taxes and CAM based on today's numbers. So that's why it's called modified gross. In an apartment, when you sign an apartment lease and you say, I'm going to pay $1,000 a month for that apartment, that's full gross. You're not expecting to get charged anything on top of that for taxes and CAM or insurance or anything else. That's just your full gross number.
Full gross.
Fully gross, right? Modified gross is what we have here, which says we're including your base rent, your taxes, your CAM in that modified gross number based on a 2021 base year for taxes and CAM. In 22, if taxes go up, CAM goes down, which is what happened last year, there's going to be a reconciliation that's done where we'll likely have to bill you slightly more or give you a credit of slightly less than what your normal payments are. And then we readjust based on our budget. We readjust your rent based on what we think it's going to be moving forward.
So in simple terms, if I'm a tenant and I'm just thinking about out of pocket, I want that fully gross rent number because it's like a price lock of some sort.
It's a lock.
Where the modified gross gives you as the owner the modest ability to adjust certain of those inputs depending on the actual changes that you then pass through.
Correct.
And that way you are able to not just absorb, but pass on cost increases for things like real estate tax.
And you can imagine the environment that we have here, especially in Cook County, which is where Chicago is and some of these suburbs, these close suburbs are, the taxes have been quite substantial, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. There's been substantial increases that we can't absorb if we're doing full gross leases. We're going to have those, no matter what, the tenants are going to pay for it. Okay.
Right.
We'll figure out a way to make it so if you say I'm only going to do a fully gross lease here, then you're probably going to be paying me $28 a square foot.
Because you'll bake it in on the front end.
And
then it's almost like taking a margin if you do have a cushion, whereas the modified gross seems to be more mutually protective.
I would definitely say that, especially for CAM purposes, because our CAM doesn't always go up. Our CAM went down last year across the board because we didn't have, think about it, it was 2020. We didn't have people in our buildings, and therefore our cleaning costs went down. Our,
water, sewer,
utilities, everything went down slightly. We did have a little bit extra, more snow, and we still have to clear the snow no matter if there's people here or not. So it was kind of cushioned by that a little bit. We do have a gross up provision as well, which allows us to basically tell you that in a situation like 2020, we don't want to get caught off, or our expenses get cut in half, and all of a sudden we're having to kick back these huge refunds because of something that is completely out of our control, like a pandemic. And so we gross those numbers up so that, the fluctuations are very small on both sides.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
All right, so Caetano seems to be blowing up the chat box for us. So I think what he meant here first was how much of the 61,000 is occupied. I think we've answered that, all but the space we're standing in right now.
Yeah, and even that other space, we're negotiating on a deal on that space right now, which I expect to do. So I will tell you that it's about, it's all but for 650 square feet. We do know there are a couple of tenants that are coming up though, and that are leaving. So, those spaces are on the market. I'm showing those spaces regularly, and my goal is to have them refilled almost simultaneous to the exit, which is hard.
The number you quoted for 75% when you acquire a building will stay. Is that just a rule of thumb?
Yeah, rule of thumb, I would say, generally speaking. That's more of it's almost a universal metric that we use to keep it consistent, and it's acceptable. It's accepted by the banks as well. So.
Caetano also asks, I think a great question, why is construction cost rise so much?
How much time you got, Caetano? I mean, there's a lot to be, your professor here is probably a better suited to answer that question in terms of why something would happen, when a regime change happens like it did here in the United
Sorry, minor drop. We'll keep going. When we left off, we were talking about the cumulative pref. So I think one thing that they would be interested in, what they're struggling, I noticed in our last lecture, is to understand, as an investor, when they walk in and they're going to commit a certain amount of money to you, you promise them this 8% preferred dividend. What about the return of capital? How does that happen?
So the return of capital usually happens over time, right? So at the end of the year, once we've budgeted for the following year, there's going to be, typically in our buildings like this and others, there will be a pile of cash sitting there, and we have to decide what we want to do with it. Do we want to reserve it for future improvements to the building? Do we want to start returning capital, right? Which is the goal at the end of the day. You want to return the money. You want to return the most expensive money first. The most expensive money is our the money that we raise from our investors in these deals. And so the sooner I can return that money, the sooner that 50-50 split starts really inuring to our benefit. So we don't really get much benefit out of this until I get the money back in their hands, the original investment that they made. And as I chip away at that investment, so too do I chip away at the amount of money that I have to commit to the 8% over the aggregate. So it's the same percentage that they get, but it's just based on less money as a return.
So let me see if I can explain it from a simplistic investor's point of view. I come to you and I want to participate in this deal. I put in $100,000 of my own dollars. You're promising me then an 8% or $8,000 annual dividend that you're probably going to pay to me quarterly.
Correct.
Okay. On top of that, if you have free cash flows at the end of the year, you'll make a decision about whether I and the rest of my investors are going to get some of that capital back.
Correct.
So maybe you give me $10,000 in addition, and you tell me my obligation then to you is still to return $90,000 in capital, and I'm going to still keep paying you the 8%.
Yes, exactly.
And then if and when at some point you go ahead and say we're all done with the deal, and I've gotten my capital back, now I get half of that proceeds.
Correct.
Of your sale from a $6 million to an $8 million building.
Correct.
So I could get paid from you three different ways: pref, return of capital, split on sale proceeds.
Split on excess cash flow.
On
it could be a refi too. I mean, if I was to refi the building and some bank decided that the building is worth $9 million, they're going to provide me debt up to a certain point. I'm going to basically take everybody.
And you can take me out with that. Use 4% money to take out your 8% money.
Exactly. Smart.
Got it. All right. So I think that covers that one. This one, so Thusa's team met with me before, which was largely, we're shutting the door because tenants are walking around. So in Chicago, more so than this isn't a space you could really convert into mixed use. You couldn't put resi on the top floor here.
No, not without significant zoning changes from the city. I mean, it would be nearly impossible.
One of the buildings that their teams were given the option to look at, I know you looked at a few years ago, was that 166 West Waukegan building. And one of the team's first suggestion is they wanted to convert the top 3 floors to resi in that thing.
So that is not a horrible suggestion at all. What you would do in a situation like that is you'd probably just convert the whole thing. But for the first floor, you would convert everything else to resi. And you probably could do that in Chicago. That's very conceivable. That's happening. A lot of those buildings. I'm actually touring the building directly next to it right after I leave here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 100 North LaSalle. I'm going to
100 North LaSalle. You're going to?
Which is right next to 166 West Washington, which is the building that we used to own. So that's actually a great suggestion for that building. An even better suggestion would be to find out if you could amplify the zoning on it, meaning get it upzoned and see if you could tear the building down and build something a little bit higher with more density.
How difficult is that in the city of Chicago?
That's been the vision for most of these developers, is to do stuff just like that. So it's not difficult at all, as long as you have the capital and you have a very good plan and you have the city on board. That building is not a great building for office anyway. It's small and it's dinky and it's just, it is what it is. I mean, it was built 100 years ago. So, it's functioning as it was and it has been for that amount of time. But that's a wonderful suggestion for something like that, is to convert it. Now, again, could you get more money renting from residents, considering how much capital you have to put into that in order to convert it?
Yeah.
Is that ever going to return to you? You have to buy the building at probably a pretty significant number just out of the gate, right? And then you have to convert it,
right,
which is more cost. And then you have to see, can those rents that I'm going to be now getting support all of that capital that needs to go into this project? Or is it better just to keep it as it is and either enhance the building in some way, shape, or form, and try to get a lift in rent?
On a simplified basis, could you compare roughly per square foot rents resi versus commercial in a location like that?
Yes, and it's all done on a per square foot basis. And in our building in the city, the rents that we're getting, and they do that on a per square foot basis per month, right? So we're getting about I want to say $1.20 per month in our spaces, whereas we're building a new 53 unit building at Ashland and Addison right now, all residential, and we're going to be getting about $3.50 a square foot for rents there. Yeah, which is considerable. That's $3.50 per month per year, and those units are approximately 800 or 900 square feet.
Yeah. Okay. I'm paying $1.75 for the new place because it's $6 on the lake.
Yeah, that's enough. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a pretty decent number.
All right. So we got that. And then there anything else? Oh, so I think this question is here. Do you give thoughtfulness to the tenant portfolio in terms of you want to ensure that they don't have to compete with one another? Would you put two different chiropractors in the same space?
And really, there's very few, like the dentists are really more sensitive to that than anything else for whatever reason. But most of those doctor groups you're going to the doctor because you like the doctor themselves and not because it's a commodity. That's not a commodity business, at least as far as I'm concerned, whereas a little bit more commoditized. And so there are a lot of our dentists in our other buildings. We don't have any in this building other than Torreson, but even Torreson has a exclusive for dentistry practice.
They do. So there you go. Excellent. So they have an exclusive on.
Yeah. So I can't rent to another dentist. But no, generally speaking, we have 3 divorce attorney groups in here. We
got plenty of divorce in the city going around.
Yeah, and we're on the, don't forget we're on the North Shore, so it's got a demographic of its own. And then, we have competing, other groups that are probably pretty close to each other, but I'm trying to think if we have any actual true competitors from the doctor groups, and I would say no.
Okay.
We have an eye doctor in here, we have an acupuncturist, we have a headache doctor, we have a pulmonologist, and none of them compete. So they all probably kind of feed into each other, actually. It's actually probably very nice complementary businesses. So that's a great question, though.
Gotcha. Well, I want to be sensitive to Mr. Bauman's time because he has to get all the way downtown. And I'll ask then Megan's last question, which was the one I know we covered extensively last time we did this class. But go ahead, Matt. I'll step out of the screen and prognosticate on what COVID means for the future of the commercial office space.
That's so funny that question is so great. I'm actually running a panel tomorrow at 1:00.
With your Casco?
No, I put together this panel for the Chicago Real Estate Council.
Okay.
And I actually will forward you the invite to that. And if you want to pass it along to these guys, it's $20 to get in, but I think it's actually a perfect segue.
Did you hear that, Gaetano? $20.
Yeah, it's $20. So maybe your professor, as part of his fundage, could foot the bill for all you guys, because I would love to have you guys in on that. I think that would be pretty amazing to listen to. I assembled the panel. There are so many implications to this that are far-reaching. I think in terms of the physical nature of the buildings, how the HVAC and how the elevator, how it's going to go to a touch. You're going to go to MERS, which is a standard for filtration in your HVAC. I mean, there are a ton of implications for this. Whereas at one point in time they were piloting, we're going to start seeing that kind of go the other way. But I don't know for how long. Like, I don't truly know how long. It's a pendulum, right? We see this pendulum all the time, and there's going to be an overreaction on one side. All right, and it's going to quickly go back to what I feel like to be is the norm. Now, it is today. There are going to be changes, and they're positive, generally positive changes, because it's business people like myself and others who are making these decisions and not the government. So we're saying for our own buildings, these things make sense. They have a return on our investment. That's the most important part, because that's the government doesn't think about that. They don't think about a return. They just think about throwing money at it and hopefully it makes sense. We think about it differently. We say, are these changes going to result in us either increasing our occupancy, somehow making our buildings more efficient, somehow expenses? That's why we do all LED. It was actually a brilliant ComEd thing where they came out and they said, we're going to incentivize you as owners to change out all these old bulbs, which are, hurting our grid, to LEDs, and they almost gave it to you for free. So there are 100 different things you can think about implication-wise post-COVID, but I think, overall, in the markets that we work and in the buildings, the types of buildings that we have, it's not going to be tremendously different.
Yeah.
So it'll just be, I think it'll be more, that effect is more acute with much larger firms across a much larger spectrum. So the Googles of the earth who have 300, 400, or 500,000 square feet, that's going to be a much more significant change for them than it will be for an attorney that has 1,200 square feet. That's not going to change an anthem.
Right.
So I hope that makes sense.
I would suggest too that you all just research on your own. There was a pretty interesting survey that went out about 2 months ago. I think it was the New York Times published it, but it was suggesting that a year ago they asked the question, after the pandemic is over, what % of you are likely to return to in-person office space? And the answer was like less than 21% or something.
Yeah.
They redid that 2 months ago, and it was north of 80.
Yeah,
so there's the pendulum right there.
You're going to continue to see that. And as masks are coming off now, and as people are getting vaccinated, I mean, it is going to be a quicker return to whatever that normal is. It doesn't mean that there aren't implications. It just means that normalcy will return very, very quickly, much quicker than people actually anticipate, I think. And specifically in our business, it's been a positive factor so far for us. So. Yeah. And I know that one of your students just said, show us some love, professor, and pay for that, which I would appreciate too.
Oh, Jesus. All right. So Bart asked a question, and I'm going to allow it to be our wrap-up one here because I think this is critical. What you all didn't see, as Matt and I were walking the hallway to set up here, he happened to see someone quickly walking out of their space, taking a phone call, sounding somewhat agitated. Matt immediately walked up and said, "Is everything okay? Is there anything that I can help you with?" And the woman turned and said, "Oh, no, it's just, I've got it, thank you." And then Matt turned to me and said, "This is the first week that they have been in the office since all of this started to happen."
Since March of 19. And they're a tenant that needs to expand.
So I would suggest, in response to Bart's question, what we have to understand about Matt is Matt occupies a sweet spot within the market that is more in the small to middle enterprise space where relationships are everything.
For sure. And
you're not dealing with some rando at Google. You're dealing with the dentist himself.
Yeah. I'm dealing with the principals across the board. Especially when we're negotiating these deals, I'm dealing with the folks that are making decisions on behalf of their companies. And so I treat those relationships very seriously. The good news for them is that they know that they're talking to the guy who's ultimately responsible for this building and who can answer questions and who can solve problems very, very quickly. My phone is always on. Every single tenant has my cell phone number. That doesn't mean I'll expect them to call me all the time, but there's protocols that they follow when there are maintenance items that they need, or if there are other things. But when there's a serious issue, and we have them all the time, I'm going to get that call, and that's okay. That's part of how we keep the tenants happy and satisfied. And some of the tenants I take golfing. Some tenants I'm going to go next door with the guy Davis next door to a baseball game as soon as I can get tickets.
Sox, baby.
Cubs. He's a Cubs fan, unfortunately. So, but yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have intimate relationships with all 150 tenants, but I will tell you that I probably know each and every one of them in some way, shape, or form. When we buy a building like this, I have meetings with every single tenant before we effectively close the deal, so I understand what I'm dealing with. So
I would suggest this as I bring this to a close. is that that's probably Matt's competitive differentiator.
100%.
Is he is a relationship builder, whether it's as president of the Chicago Area Shopping Center Association,
Yeah.
whether it's setting up panels, or whether it's meeting with bankers and investors. If you hearken back to our first conversation that we had that I produced for them with someone named Rod Berthold, who represented a phantom investor. Rod said what mattered to him 30 years, and he's taken another hour and a half out of his day for no pay just to help you all learn. And so on your behalf, Mr. Matt Bauman, thank you for your time and attention today.
Nice to meet you all. Good luck, everybody, in your future endeavors. And I hope if it's in real estate that you get to our fair counting that you'll reach out.
And always, if and when they should be able to come on site, I know that you would be